Hey. It's good. I'm glad my mom is here and the 4 other people. Nice. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to session 3. My name is Reed, if we haven't met yet. I've heard that this is the tone-setting camp, right? Camp 1. And so you guys are setting the tone for everybody else to follow. I was texting with Noah today, and he said you guys were great and that he loved you, and he wanted me to tell you that. And so, yay. And so, sweet Noah. But my name is Reed, and we probably haven't met, obviously. I know maybe one of you in this room, Jordan Chambliss, he's somewhere around here. So there he is. Yeah. Jordan's a youth pastor, and I was his youth pastor, and now I'm just old. And so, but yeah, so I'm excited to be here. A little bit about me, just so that we can get to know each other. But we'll do this quick. A little bit about me. I'm a pastor. I'm from Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is Gwinnett or just Georgia, just like the state. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. I was like, you're from Gwinnett? What? Yeah, right outside of Atlanta. Everybody says Atlanta if they're from Georgia because nobody wants to say Macon, and so. Yeah, so I'm from Gwinnett County, right outside of Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm so excited to be here because you guys, I've spent a lot of years coming to BigStuf. My first times coming to BigStuf were as a youth leader, and so where are all my youth leaders, volunteers? Yeah, you're a volunteer. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you're like, you're not proud of it either. You're like, I'm here. Yeah, this was my vacation, and so. And so we got, I came as a volunteer, and then after coming as a volunteer, then I became a youth pastor, and I would bring my groups down here to BigStuf. Where are all my youth pastors at? Yeah, youth pastors? Okay. Wow, you guys need a Red Bull. And so, I know. Y'all, can we give it up real quick, though, for your youth leaders and your youth pastors, students? Yeah. Grateful for you guys, youth pastors, youth leaders. Just wanted to say that. Grateful for you. Grateful for the way that you love and serve these students. And they may not be able to articulate it right now, but they're grateful too. And also thank you for prioritizing the faith of the next generation. It's worth everything. And so we're grateful for you. So I spent a lot of years coming down to BigStuf, you guys, with as a youth leader, as a youth pastor, and then in more recent years, I've gotten to come down here and be a speaker. And so I just absolutely love BigStuf, and as any of you who have come down here before know, like you, I've had my life deeply impacted, my faith deeply impacted by the summers that I've spent here. And so I'm excited for what God's got in store for us in the next few sessions together as we continue to unpack this idea of the flip side. Now, to kick off our time together, I want to ask you a question, and the question is this: Have you ever heard something, and then when you heard it, immediately you thought to yourself, "There's no way that can be true"? Yeah. Maybe it was something that you saw or you read online, and you were like, "No way, not real," like fake news, or that's AI, or whatever it is, and you see it, and you're like, "That it can't be true." I have 3 kids. And they might be somewhere in the room where one of them's just laying on the ground. He's like, I don't care what he's saying. And so I have 3 kids, Blakely, Miles, and Landon, and they have these books, you guys, that they're really into right now, and they're called Weird But True. And in these books, they're full of facts that, honestly, just as the name says, they're weird, but they're true. They sound unbelievable, but apparently they're true. And I say apparently because I read some of these things, or they come and share some of these things with me, and I'm thinking, that can't be right. I'll give you a few examples. Did you know sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins? Okay. Some of you are like, wow. Some of you are like, yeah, I already knew that. And I'm like, why are you here? And so sloths can hold their breath longer than dolphins. When I hear that, I'm like, that sounds unbelievable, right? Apparently what the Weird But True says is that sloths can slow their heart rate to the point that their body doesn't need as much oxygen, and they can hold their breath for up to 40 minutes, whereas dolphins usually need to come up for air every 10 to 15 minutes. Another weird but true fact: the average cloud weighs as much as 100 elephants. Exactly. You're like, no, that's not real. The floaty things. Do you know what I mean? This is what it says. It says that clouds, while they may seem light and fluffy, they're made up of countless tiny water droplets or ice crystals crystals that collectively add up to a significant weight, weighing up to over 100 elephants, right? Here's another one that I thought, no way. I had to fact check it. Australia's diameter across is actually wider than the moon. Australia is wider than the moon in diameter, which just seems untrue. I'm like, what? But apparently somebody who's really smart has measured it, and it turns out that Australia's diameter from east to west is approximately 4,000 kilometers, while the moon's diameter is 3,474 kilometers. Take that, moon. And so here's another one that my kids shared with me that, again, I had to Google in order to confirm that in their little book, Weird But True, giraffes and humans have the same number of neck bones. And I was like, what? Somebody goes, yeah, I knew that. I'm well-read. The answer is actually that they have seven neck bones, and it's the same as most other mammals. Interestingly enough, you guys, chickens have more neck bones than both giraffes and humans. They have between 14 and 17. Go chickens. So, you hear some of those things. The reason why I share that, you hear some of those things, and even though they're in a book and they come from an apparently credible source, there's a part of me, and maybe a part of you too, that when you hear that, you're thinking, there's no way that's true, right? You hear that and you're like, nah, like that it's just hard to believe. And the reason why I share that tonight, you guys, is because one, I thought that they were interesting, and I've got the microphone. But the other reason why I share that tonight is because when it comes to your faith, here's the reality. When it comes to your faith and your own spiritual journey, many of us have felt or will feel at some point the same way. The same way when it comes to our faith and questions surrounding the Bible or Christianity or Jesus or church and so on, right? Like we will have moments when we're looking at these things and we will think to ourselves, is that true? Is that true? Can that be real? I mean, maybe you've had some of those thoughts already. Maybe that's where you're at tonight. You're thinking some of those thoughts right now. You've been asked a question about the Bible and caused you to do a deep dive, and now you're wondering, can I trust it? You've faced a difficult season. You've witnessed something that seems unfair. It's difficult to explain. You've gone through some pain that is impossible to resolve, and you don't have an answer for it. You've watched somebody else go through something. You just heard Glow talking about something like that, and you've tried to comfort the person, but you don't have the words, and it's made you ask some questions, and you're going, is this true? Is this real? I mean, you look around the world and there's so much hate in our world. There's so much pain. There's so much hypocrisy all around us. There's so much death that we've had to face. There's confusion about who and what is right and wrong. There are so many questions that need answering, and you think to yourself, how could this be true? There's no way. And for some of us, when we face questions that we don't feel like we can answer, when we face situations and circumstances that seem unfair, when we face pain that we can't resolve, or we see somebody else face pain that we can't resolve, then it causes us to doubt. And doubt, you guys, can be scary. Doubt can be scary, it can be discouraging, it can be frustrating, it can be lonely, it can feel bad, it can even feel wrong. I mean, especially for those of us who have grown up in church and we feel like, man, I shouldn't be doubting this stuff. And maybe you are there and you've been wondering, what's wrong with me? For others of us, we find ourselves in environments like this, right? And it seems like we're surrounded by people who are full of faith, or at least they know the lingo well enough to be able to pretend like they are. And we look around the room and we've got our questions and we've got our doubts, and we wonder what's wrong with us, or maybe you're looking around and you're wondering what's wrong with them. And on top of some of that, then some of us, you guys, we've been taught to believe that doubt isn't just sinful, right? That doubt is actually sinful, that it's not of God, that it's the opposite or the enemy of genuine faith. We've been taught to believe that if we question or if we doubt, that something is wrong, or even worse, you guys, that we don't belong. I know that's certainly how I felt growing up. As a matter of fact, I specifically remember a time, you guys, when I was in the 6th grade and I was in Sunday school. Does anybody know about Sunday school? You got that? Yeah? Okay. Look at that. I was in Sunday school, and I was in the 6th grade. And 6th grade, I was also in public school, and I was in health class. And so I was learning a little bit about the birds and the bees. And so I asked a question in my Sunday school class, and I asked my teacher, I said, hey, do you really think Mary was a virgin? Which if you're a youth leader right now, you're like, whew, you're throwing fastballs as a 6th grader. I was like, yeah. I said, hey, do you really think Mary was a virgin? And my Sunday school leader at the time, his eyes got wide. What do you mean? Like, of course, right? And I was like, because I know how this works, right? And so I was like, help me understand. And then I go, what makes you think that? And before he can get his next answer out, he's already rattled by the question. Before he can get his next answer out, then all of a sudden, you guys, a room full of 6th graders, right? There's I too have a question, and it's everybody, hands are going up, and they're like, what about the dinosaurs? And then and then you got another question, and somebody else is asking, and they're like, was Jonah really swallowed by a fish? And so you're like, and now the questions are coming, and the guy is he's rattled. And his face is turning red, and he doesn't know how to answer everything, and they're coming all at once, and it's I've opened Pandora's box, and he looks at me, and I think I was probably just the brunt of his frustration and embarrassment in the moment, you guys, but he looks at me, 6th grade, I've asked an honest question, and he says, I'm gonna need you to sit in the hall. And my mom and dad are right over there, you guys, and they could verify this. When my mom comes to pick me up, I'm sitting in the hall. I got kicked out of Sunday school for asking an honest question. And that taught me at an early age that it was not okay to doubt. And it wasn't okay to ask questions. And that church might not be a safe place. And it taught me at an early age that if you have doubts, that doubts might actually kick you out. And so you learn to stuff it, and you learn to wrestle with it in silence, and you don't ask, and you don't bring it up in small group, and you don't bring it up at church, and you don't want to talk to your parents about it because you don't want them to think you're doubting. And so instead you deconstruct sitting in your room at night on Google watching YouTube videos, and you're wrestling with the questions and the doubt, but you're not afraid to, or you're too afraid to bring it out into the open. Doubts, you guys, were presented to me as an enemy of my faith. And what I wanted to ask tonight, and what I wanted us to talk about tonight as we're exploring this topic of flip side is, what if that's actually not true at all? What if, you guys, what if doubt is not the enemy to your faith? What if there could be a benefit in your life and in your faith to honest, genuine doubt and questions? What if doubt could actually be a catalyst for growth and could actually lead us on a path to a deeper and more authentic and more meaningful faith? There's a story in the gospel, you guys, that in the Gospels that actually brings this idea into a brilliant focus, and I want to share it with you tonight. The story's found in John chapter 20. If you have a Bible, you can begin to turn there, but I'm gonna kind of set the scene for where we're going while you're turning there. But John, if you're not familiar with the Gospel of John, there are 4 biographical accounts of the life of Jesus. 2 of them are written by people who actually spent time with Jesus, and then 2 of them are written by people who spent time with people that spent time with Jesus. These gospel accounts, right, these biographical accounts of the life of Jesus are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And John, the gospel, was written by somebody who actually spent time with Jesus, one of Jesus' best friends and earliest followers. And John began following Jesus at an early age, but then as an older man, some people believe probably in his 80s, John just realizes he doesn't have much time left on the clock, and he wants future generations to be able to know, love, trust, and follow Jesus. And so he sets out to write down some of the things that he saw, some of the things that he heard, some of the things that he experienced in order to encourage future generations in their faith journey and in their exploration of Jesus. And so John writes down some of these stories, and one of them is found in John chapter 20. We find the story of one of John's friends who is actually one of the most famous doubters in history. Many of you might know his name. His name is, okay, there you go. Yeah, Thomas, right? Yeah, and all the kids with like Awana badges are like, yeah. And so, And so Thomas, right? Like in John chapter 20, we get the story of one of the most famous doubters in history. His name is Thomas. Some of you have heard of him. A little context, if you're not familiar with Thomas, I'll go ahead and let you know a little bit about Thomas. Thomas is actually one of the original disciples. He's also called Didymus. John points that out a couple different times. The word just means twin, so apparently Thomas is a twin, but we never meet his twin, but John wants you to know that he was a twin. He's like, he's not the only one, I guess. And so Thomas is one of these guys. He was present in Jesus' ministry for some of Jesus' most amazing moments. He had a front row seat to witness Jesus perform miracles, to heal the sick, to cast out demons. He heard some of his greatest sermons and teachings. He was there in the moment when Jesus fed a crowd with a kid's Lunchable. It was like he was there for like all the moments, right? Thomas was actually a passionate follower of Jesus. He wasn't always a doubter. At one point, as a matter of fact, what you see in the life of Jesus and Thomas, what you see is that he's even so enthusiastic at one point in his life about following Jesus that he's even proclaims himself willing to die with Jesus. If you're familiar with the story in John chapter 11, one of Jesus' friends, his name is Lazarus, he gets sick. They send word for Jesus to come and heal him. Jesus takes his time and delays, and Lazarus actually ends up dying, and then Jesus says, hey, now it's time, we're gonna go, and I'm gonna actually bring Lazarus back to life. And when Jesus decides to head back to where Lazarus lives, this is what it says. This is in John chapter 11, verse 8. You don't have to turn there, I'm just giving you some insight about Thomas. He says this. It says, but Rabbi, they said, Jesus' disciples, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you're going back? Translation, hey, Jesus, if we go back to where Lazarus is now, they might kill you. And what they're really saying is they might kill you, but they might kill us. And so it's a bit of honest concern from his crew, but look what Thomas says. A few verses later, it says, then Thomas, also known as Didymus, he said to the rest of the disciples, let us also go that we may die with him. Thomas, right? Thomas didn't always have these doubts. He wasn't a wishy-washy disciple, you guys. He wasn't an on-the-fence follower. He was all in. He was 10 toes down. He was like, if I'm going, then or if you're going, then I'm going. I've got your back. If they're going to kill you, they're going to have to kill me too. That's the kind of disciple that Thomas was. But then something happens, you guys. In John chapter 20, we're going to read about the results. But something happens that rocks Thomas's life and faith. A few chapters after what we just read in John chapter 11, where Thomas is ready to die with Jesus, Jesus and his friends make their way to Jerusalem, and all of his friends, they believe that at this point Jesus is going to take back Israel from the clutches of the Roman Empire, and he's going to establish himself as king. And instead, not long after they arrive in Jerusalem, Jesus is betrayed by a close friend. He's arrested by the religious authorities. He is beaten. He is bloodied. He is nailed to a cross by the Roman Empire. And there he dies a gruesome and humiliating death in front of all of his friends and family in the world to see. And his followers, you guys, are devastated. They're shocked. They're grief-stricken. And as you can probably imagine, this deeply affected Thomas. Here is a person who Thomas cared about. And not just a rabbi and a teacher, but this is his friend. Someone that he hadn't just spent a few days with, you guys. He'd spent years of his life with. Someone that he had come to trust in and believe in, and now he's dead, and Thomas is spiraling. He's questioning everything. And he's asking honest questions like, was any of this real? Was it legit? Was this a huge waste of time? Have I been lied to? Have I been lying to myself? Have I been stupid for believing this the whole time? You ever feel like that? When you come across a question that catches you off guard and you don't have an answer for it? When you're confronted by situations and circumstances that are completely inexplicable and unfair? When you or someone you care about experiences hurt or pain that you cannot explain or resolve? You ever been there? And you start asking some honest, hard questions. Some of you start asking, do I believe this just because my parents do? Is faith in God just a crutch for weak people? Is this just some kind of feel-good cult of compassion, a big toxic positivity parade that refuses to face reality? Like, is that what this is all about? Some of you in the room, you know exactly how Thomas felt. Because you know the pain you've experienced. You know the pain that you're in. You know just how lonely you are, how deeply wounded you feel. You know how betrayed you feel. You know how broken your heart is. You know the questions that you've got that you still don't have answers to, and it's shaken you. And it has rattled you, and it has caused you to question things a bit. That's the state that we find Thomas in John chapter 20. And so if you're there, John chapter 20, starting in verse 24, this is where we pick up with Thomas. It says, now Thomas, again, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. And so the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. So right before this, but I didn't have time to read all of John chapter 20 for us tonight, so I'll give you just a little recap. But right before this moment, what has happened is that Jesus has appeared to some of the disciples. And he showed up and he shows himself now. He's been crucified, he was buried, and now he's alive and he's making house calls. And he has shown up. But for some reason, when Jesus shows up this first time, and we have no clue why, for some reason when Jesus showed up the first time, Thomas wasn't there. Now, maybe, this is just me guessing, but maybe he was just sick of them, which some of you can relate to. You've only been here for a day and a half and you're already like, go away from me. You know what I mean? Like, can I get another room, right? And so maybe he's just sick of these guys. He just doesn't want to be around them for right now. Maybe you guys, maybe he's grieving, and you guys know this, that some of us, when we're in grief, we just need our space. So maybe he just needs space to grieve. Maybe, I was thinking about it, I'm like, man, maybe he was just like running an errand. Wouldn't that stink though? Like if you came back with like snacks and you're like, guys, I got Funyuns. And they're like, well, we saw Jesus. And he's like, what? Like that would be a huge bummer. But for whatever reason, right, Thomas isn't there, and we don't know why Thomas missed that moment. But apparently, right, Thomas is back with his friends, and they're telling him, like, look, we've seen the Lord. And if you look at the original language, they don't just say it to him once. That phrase in the original language means that they kept on telling him, because obviously they realized that that's a hard thing to believe. And so they're saying to him, no, we saw him. I promise he's back. It's not over. He's alive. It's going to be okay. And Thomas, you guys, is having none of it. He's having none of it. Look what he says next. Next verse, 25. He said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my fingers where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. And when he says, I will not believe, there are three ways that you can say that in the Greek, and Thomas chooses the strongest, which it would be more accurately translated, I will never believe. That's how emphatic he is about this. And if I'm just being honest with you guys, though, Thomas's response is really not all that unexpected. I mean, if I'm just being totally real with you all, this would probably be my response. If somebody that I was friends with, that I was close to, my pastor or a leader in my life had just passed away, and now all of a sudden I came back and my friends are telling me that he's alive and they've hung out with him, I would be like, what? Like, I don't believe you. And so, Thomas's response gets him labeled Doubting Thomas for all of eternity, and yet, in reality, I think he should probably just be called Honest Thomas, yeah? I'm like, goodness gracious, right? What these guys are saying to him is way crazier than a sloth could beat a dolphin in a hold your breath contest, right? They're going, yeah, the guy you saw murdered and buried, he's back. He's alive. And Thomas has doubts. Justifiably so. Because dead people usually stay dead. Thomas's doubts are not ridiculous. His questions are genuine. He's not being faithless in this moment, you guys. Thomas isn't being faithless in this moment. He's being honest. Can I tell you something, young people? Faithful followers of Jesus, listen, will often face very serious seasons of question and doubt. And my encouragement to you is do not believe any version of Christianity that says otherwise. I love what one author, A.J. Swoboda, he says this in his book. It's called After Doubt. He says, to struggle with one's faith is often the surest sign that we actually have one. I'll say that again. He says, to struggle with one's faith is often the surest sign that we actually have one. And that's what Thomas is doing here. He's struggling and he's wrestling and he hears what his friends have to say, but he's not just gonna buy it. And so Thomas says, no way, I wanna see the body, and unless I do, I'm not gonna believe. And the text doesn't say explicitly this, but I think in this moment when you read it, Thomas is more than just sad. I think he's angry. I think Thomas is angry with his friends in this moment. I think he thinks that they are dealing with their grief in an irrational way and that they're living in denial. And so I think when Thomas is saying this, like, hey, I want to see the body before I'm going to believe, otherwise I'm never going to believe. I think what he's also saying to them in this moment, and this is just me, this is not in the text, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think what he's actually saying is quit lying to yourselves. Wake up and smell the coffee. Jesus is dead. I think he's mad. John doesn't tell us how the other disciples respond. He doesn't record the whole interaction. But what he doesn't put in there is that these guys made fun of him, or shamed him, or guilted him, or argued with him, or made him feel bad. Listen, Thomas brought very real struggle and very real questions, and his friends listened. You guys, we need safe spaces to struggle, yes? And we need safe spaces to ask questions. And I am praying, y'all, I was praying back there while y'all were singing these songs. I was praying back there for you. Listen, that your church and that your youth group and that your small group and that each of you as individuals would be safe places for people to come with honest questions. The church has not been, but we ought to be, the safest place to talk about anything, especially our questions and our doubts. We have to be. We have to be. And so Thomas, you guys, and I'm going to wrap up, but Thomas is devastated and he's doubting, and here's what happens next. We're going to get right now to the flip side of his doubt and our doubt. We're going to learn what is waiting for us on the flip side of our doubts if we're willing and honest and courageous enough to bring our doubts to Jesus. This is what Thomas says, or this is what John says. He says, a week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. So a week has passed, you guys. A week has gone by, and the crew is still getting together. They're still meeting together. And I love that John points out here that Thomas is still with them. A week has gone by since Thomas has expressed his doubts and his questions, and he's gone, I don't believe any of this anymore. And yet it's important to note here, you guys, that Thomas stuck around. Listen, young people, even in his doubts and in his struggles and possibly his frustration and anger with these other guys, Thomas still chooses to show up. He sticks around. And so if you're here tonight, I hope you can hear me. If you've got questions and you've got doubts, I just want to encourage you, keep showing up. Stick around. You may not get all your questions answered. You probably won't. There will always be some mystery. It's the reason why it's called faith. But stick around and ask and wrestle and seek. And not just for your sake and not just for your faith, but for ours. Because your questions, your honest questions, actually force the people around you to examine their own faith as well. I'll just go ahead and tell you as a pastor, some of the moments that have grown me the most are when I had to wrestle not with my questions, but with somebody else's. And they asked it, and I hadn't thought about that. Or they asked it, and I didn't have a great answer for that. Or they asked it, and the answer that I gave them was not sufficient, and I had to dig in. Some of my most challenging and beneficial moments in my faith came from wrestling with other people's questions that were willing to show up and to lean in, and it compelled me to move forward and solidify what and why I believe for myself. So for the doubters and the question askers and the seekers and the ones that are struggling to hold on, keep showing up. So everyone's together, and you might be wondering why the locked doors, and it's because they don't want what happened to Jesus to happen to them, and they know they'd be guilty by association, and so the doors are locked, and then all of a sudden, no knock, no picked lock, just Jesus, right? He shows up. I always like to imagine that that's how Jesus showed up places, just like, but I don't know. Maybe it was more chill than that. Probably was. Jesus shows up in the room, and he graciously offers them this greeting, and he says, "Peace be with you." It's literally the kindest greeting that you can give in the Greek. You guys, it literally means all peace in all ways, at all times, in every sense of the word, be yours. And you'll notice who he says this to. Not just the disciples who had seen him and believed, but he says this to Thomas too. You guys, Jesus gives doubting Thomas the kindest greeting you could give to anybody. He does not scold him, although he could. He does not shame him. He does not belittle him. He doesn't berate him. And he does not tell him, go sit in the hall. He doesn't. He offers him peace. And it means, you guys, this is so encouraging to me. That's the reason why I'm getting emotional. It's not sad tears. This is so moving. And I wish I would have heard this when I was your age. Because I spent a lot of years with doubt avoiding Jesus because I thought doubt counted me out. And then you read about Thomas. And it's so encouraging because Jesus knows Thomas's doubts and he offers him peace. It means that God is not intimidated by your questions and he's not turned off by your doubts. It means that you're free, young people, to not know everything or have all the answers. It means that you're invited to be honest with God. God doesn't count you out when you have doubts. And your doubts don't have to be an off-ramp to your faith. What we learn from the story of Thomas, you guys, is that on the flip side of your doubt is a God who offers you peace. On the flip side of your doubt is a God who offers you peace. Jesus goes on to say to Thomas, he says, put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting now, Thomas, and believe. Jesus shows up and he shows Thomas his scars as if to say, it's real, Thomas, I'm real, Thomas, it really happened. Yes, you weren't imagining things, you saw me die, and yet at the same time, yes, here I am, scars and all. I think it's interesting, you guys, that Jesus kept his scars on his resurrected body because he certainly didn't have to. And yet the scars are evidence of what he'd been through and what God had done in raising him from the dead. Christians in the room, the same is true for you, you know. Your scars, the parts of your story that hold the most pain and the most hurt and the most shame, they're also often the parts that hold the most hope and the most grace and the most encouragement, because they show others what God has brought you through and what he's capable of. Don't hide your scars. Jesus knows what Thomas is wrestling with, and he shows up and he gives Thomas exactly what he needed to believe. And you guys, here's what I believe, is that he can do the same thing for you. He doesn't promise to give you all the answers or the certainty that you're looking for, but he will give you what you need to continue to believe. No clue if Thomas actually followed through. I don't know if he touched Jesus' hands or if he touched his side. All we know is that Jesus shows up and he's in the room, and for Thomas, that's enough. Big stuff tonight. By his word, by his spirit, where two or more are gathered, there he says, I am also. And so by this community of faith which is gathered here, Jesus is here too, and so are you. And I just wonder tonight if that might be enough. Not to answer all your questions, but enough that you can go on believing and holding on to faith. Thomas's story says to you and me, you guys, that on the flip side of your doubt, it's not answers. On the flip side of your doubt is a God who offers you peace and invites you to bring your doubts to him with honesty and courage and still believe. Students, hear me. God doesn't count you out because you doubt. You're free to not have all the answers. You'll never have all the answers. You're free to rest in mystery. And you can pray prayers like this: God, please stay close while I wonder about some things. God's not going anywhere when you doubt. He's not threatened, and doubt is not a threat to your genuine faith. It's often the first step on a road to faith, or the next step on the journey of your genuine faith. So may we, you guys, like Thomas, keep showing up, keep asking, keep seeking, keep bringing your doubts and your questions to Jesus. You won't get all your answers, but I believe you'll discover a God who offers us peace. And you'll forge a faith that is deeper and stronger, more authentic, more resilient, and more real because it has been questioned and examined and tested, which is exactly what your Heavenly Father wants for you. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for this word. Thank you for this reminder. Thank you that in the face of doubt, it doesn't count us out. You're not intimidated or turned off or angry when we have questions and when we wrestle. You expect it, and you invite us to bring our honest selves to you. And you want that. You want that version of us, not the us that we're pretending to be, not the one that pretends like we've got it all together. You're not offering some plastic, pain-free, problem-free, wrinkle-free faith. It's more real, it's more raw, it's more gritty than that. And so help us to be encouraged by Thomas's honesty and his authenticity, and help us to do the same. Help us to keep leaning in, keep showing up. And God, I pray that as we do, that you would meet with us and you would give us exactly what we need to continue to move forward and believe. I pray these things in the matchless name of Jesus. Amen.